You are Locked On Hawks Postcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome everybody into yet another episode of the official Atlanta Hawks Postcast. Of course, it's me right back with you once again, DeShaun Tate, for a recapping of game number 69 on the road against the Charlotte Hornets, and I like to think, a pretty decent show. So people are feeling pretty good on tonight about the win. So of course, no more jinxing myself, where it's like on the show hosting by myself without Tanitra and always having to open up the show talking about another unfortunate set of circumstances, another unfortunate loss for the Atlanta Hawks. Not having that conversation on tonight. 134-102, big time win for the Atlanta Hawks over the Charlotte Hornets. Not only doing that, but sweeping. Let it settle in. Yes, I said it right. Sweeping the season series against the Charlotte Hornets, that is. I'll tell you why that's such a big deal, unless you've been living under a rock or not following the Atlanta Hawks very closely. Then you will know that this was such a big deal. And we'll go into talking about why, of course, on tonight. We'll discuss a little bit about why and how, perhaps why it was so necessary and so important for the Hawks to have learned their lesson. Apparently, they clearly show that they have done such things on tonight. Cut to the break, and on the other side of that, of course, in our second segment, we'll get into the next man up, maybe potentially talking about, pending how long this player is going to be out, which player could we be seeing garnering more minutes, having more impact, and just contributing more than we're probably used to seeing, and why it's such about time that we see such things. And then, of course, to finish things off in the last segment, before we, have to head out and start looking forward to the Golden State Warriors, we'll discuss a little bit about what we saw on tonight in such rare form for the Atlanta Hawks. We've only been waiting, I don't even know how long we've been waiting to see them in this such rare form. So we'll talk about exactly what that rare form entails on tonight. But of course, we won't do any of that before we let everybody know that tonight's episode of the official Atlanta Hawks Postcast is brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the app today and use the code Locked On NBA. Again, Locked On NBA, LOCKEDONNBA, to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That is Prize Picks. Run your game. Let's jump right into it, because while this thing is still hot, still cooking, it's almost like that plate, right? When you're at, one of those, I don't know, I'm not bougie and got all the big money, probably like a lot of you do. So I just say Applebee's, where they bring that food out there. It's usually some kind of a shrimp of some sort with all sorts of really good, loaded big potato and asparagus and all the good stuff. And it's still, you like that noise I make? Sizzling, cooking on that hot plate. And that's exactly what the Atlanta Hawks were doing here on tonight in that big time win that they really needed. Now, I personally thought that some of the keys for this particular game was to, number one, keep your foot on the gas, because it's clear to see that this was a team that needed to learn its lesson based off of the previous game 48 hours ago against the Brooklyn Nets, to not read the names on the front of the jerseys, right? To do what you're supposed to do, considering the fact. Let's go back here for just a second and look at all the players. Maybe not a ton, but certainly major contributing players that were out for the Brooklyn Nets on Sunday night. Okay, you've got Cam Thomas, you've got Noah Clowney, you've got DeAnthony Melton, and you've got D'Angelo Russell. Many of those guys, while it does only appear to be just four guys, many of those guys being, big time pieces that produce a lot, especially from a scoring standpoint and just an experience standpoint for the Brooklyn Nets. And for whatever reason, if you can remember, 122 to 114, the Hawks weren't able to overcome not only necessarily just the deficit per se, right? That they happen to have endured, but even more so, I'd say the fact that this was a Hawks team that really it was just a winnable game. It was a game that you were supposed to win. It was a game that just, again, whether you look at it about being on paper or not, no matter where it was played at, didn't matter if it was played in the Big Apple, didn't matter if it was played at State Farm Arena, it didn't matter if that game was played on the moon. Most people, 9 out of 10, minimum 8 out of 10, would say that this is a game that the Atlanta Hawks is supposed to win. All such things being said and considered, right? You had that opportunity yet again where you didn't have LaMelo Ball, right? You didn't have Trey Mann. You didn't have Brandon Miller. You didn't have Miles Bridges. You didn't have Josh Okogie. You didn't have Grant Williams. From the guy who scores the most and has the biggest impact and is clearly the most marketable guy on the roster, all the way down to the role players with the experience, the heart and soul that Grant Williams is, the defensive player that Josh Okogie is, the emotional leader / star player that is LaMelo Ball, the athleticism star player that is Brandon Miller, the highlight film himself, just waiting for a top 10 play to happen, Miles Bridges. None of those guys were active on tonight and did not play. And I just really thought that in this situation, this is one that the Hawks had to go ahead and take care of. This is the one that they had to take advantage of. So in that sense, the Hawks really needed to learn their lesson from Brooklyn on the other night. Excuse me, keeping your foot on the gas, I think, was the most important thing, because there wasn't much of a question in my mind, or I would have been very upset in my own way, right? Wanting to call some guys out, definitely saying had they lost this game, there ain't going to be rolling out no balls during practice as we get ready to prepare for Golden State. We're just going to, really just be running. I remember being young and at a point in time and playing basketball in my youthful years. And whenever we had, disappointing letdown games, coach used to tell us, hey, you guys are going to be running at practice and I'm not running. I mean, wait, you guys, and I could try to say this verbatim, you guys at practice are going to be running until I get tired and I'm not running. That was the situation, I think, for about 2 or 3 hours straight or whatever it was when I was in high school. Shout out to my high school coach as well. But that was the situation. And that would have been the situation if I'm the head coach, if I, am in position, right, as Quinn Snyder, had they lost this game. Obviously, they didn't. That would have been the situation. But the most important thing as to why we didn't see such things is because they did keep their foot on the gas. When you go up, you have to stay up. We always talk about that critical third quarter that the Atlanta Hawks always find a way to, I guess, wilt in some form or fashion or in some way where the other team finds a way to start coming back. How do they do that? I don't know why that is. Sometimes just the defensive side of things. And obviously we'll get into the defensive side of things when we start talking about our player of the game a little bit. But that was something that was important to get out in transition and, get to a point where you pretty much just run these guys off the floor. You empower your will, on the other team who's not supposed to be on the same level as you are, like it's happened to you for many times, if I'm just being really transparent, when the Hawks were young and had guys that were out and things of that nature. Other teams didn't have any problem taking advantage of that. Other teams didn't have any problem, I guess, just imposing that will on the Hawks, and really didn't have any sympathy on the Hawks. That's something that the Atlanta Hawks needed to do on tonight. 19-14 from a transition, fast break point standpoint. Obviously, everybody knows that the Atlanta Hawks is one of the best in the NBA in terms of pace and scoring within that pace. The other thing I think that they needed to do is just kind of feed the youthful players and develop the players within games like this. And that's something I think they did, maybe not necessarily with both players, because there was two players that I thought should have been highlighted for such things on tonight, where you start out often and early, feeding these guys, getting these guys the basketball, letting them get their shots up, things like that. And one of those players was Zachary Reese-Sachet, right? As we saw him come away tonight with 21 points, 8 rebounds, 7 for 15 from the field. So a little less than 50%, shy of 50%, which is fine. That's okay. How about 5 for 9 from 3, above 50%? So I think that's really good, especially considering how youthful that he is, and just kind of still getting acclimated and adjusted to the game, and really just trying to find that confidence and comfortability within himself. And I think he did himself a fine job from that. Not as much by the other guy that I really feel like would have been nice to see that from, which is Muhammad Gay, walking away, 4 points, 3 rebounds, 1 for 6 from the field, and 1 for 5 from 3. Definitely not good. But however, I do love the fact that they fed him the basketball. They gave him that green light to be able to get those shots up and so forth. So when it does come time to where there's a game that people are actually watching, right, or putting themselves in crunch positions or situations, and Trae Young has the basketball and they're in a clutch or a crunch type of position, right, and the game is coming down to the wire, and someone's doubling on him, and he, obviously everybody knows that he's one of the better facilitators and distributors in the game. You swing it out to somebody, even if Muhammad Gay is not necessarily that person, there are circumstances where you just have to really focus on getting the ball to the open guy and relying on him to convert on the basket. And so getting up these types of shots just in games in general, even if it's against teams that clearly you have a lot of inactives on the other side of the ball, that opposition, it's good to be able to get those shots up. So give those guys the opportunity to put the ball in the basket, whether they do it or not, obviously a different conversation. But I love how Muhammad Gay, one thing that he did is, even though he did not convert on many of those shots, one thing that I'm proud of is the fact that he does get back on the other side of the ball. He does defend. He does rim protect for a guy who's not in position to be considered like a 5 or a 4, just to be honest, right? So I think that that's a good thing that we get a chance to see him not only getting some burn, but getting some shots up and playing really good defense, because I don't worry about him on that side. And then the last thing is to go out there and have fun, right? They had a job to do. They went out there and they did that job. And I think it's important for them to be able to have fun, because that's where some of that growth. There's a lot of times that we watch this Atlanta Hawks team, and unless they're on that like 7 or 8 game win streak, whatever it was, that we saw them on their way to the in-season tournament, right? The success that they had, it doesn't always appear that they're out there having fun. I think it was good to see that on tonight, because you do want to keep the guys confident and don't want them to be discouraged and so forth. So what we're going to do is, on the other side of this, we'll talk a little bit about the turning point that I kind of kept an eye on for this particular game. What changed things around? What made things look so much different? And even more so, perhaps maybe the next guy up for a guy that we, over the last few games, have not seen in action, right here on the other side of this break. When it comes to grocery shopping, meal planning, even, I've had this ongoing problem. I just don't have the time. Got the money, no problem. Just don't have the time. You start factoring things in between work and just life. That be life and all the time, and just you know having to whether you're having to come home and put the kids in the bathtub, or having to come home and help the kids with the homework and put them to bed, and doing just last minute things around the house, whatever the case may be, trying to eat healthier. I was constantly kind of feeling a little bit stressed out, maybe not as much stressed out as I was anxiety, but I noticed I'd go to the grocery store, I'd buy things I didn't need. I was going to the grocery store with an empty stomach, so of course you start buying more things than you actually do need, just because you're so hungry at that point. And then you end up with no time to actually do the cooking, right? And sticking to my health goals, I kind of feel like that was a little bit of a struggle too. Well, I'll tell you this much: everything changed when I discovered Hungry Root. Honestly, it's been a game changer. It's the easiest way to eat healthy without all the stress. With Hungry Root, it's like having a personal shopper and a nutritionist all in one. They take care of my grocery shopping and even my meals and groceries based on my taste and health goals, from anti-inflammatory to high protein and gluten-free options even. And perhaps maybe even the best part is that every meal is ready in just 15 minutes or less. I'm talking about quick, very healthy meals that actually taste great, all delivered straight to my doorstep. It's been a huge time saver and has made healthy eating so much simpler. So if you're going to love Hungry Root as much as I do, I promise you that, be sure to remember that for a limited time, get 40% off your first box and a free item in every box for life. Who doesn't love that word? FREE, free. Everybody. I don't know one person that doesn't. Just go to hungryroot.com/lockedonnba and use code LockedOnNBA. That's hungryroot.com/lockedonnba. The code Locked On NBA to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. That's hungryroot.com/Locked On NBA, code Locked On NBA. Don't miss out. And then, of course, there's this, where you check your bank account and you always seem to wonder, where in the world did all the money go? I remember hearing my mom back in the day always saying, son, it doesn't fall off the trees. And we're talking about between dining out, online shopping, entertainment. It's easy to lose track of how much you're spending. That's just natural. That's just life. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, all of your investments, and spending, even, all in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start actually building your wealth. I'll tell you this much, the managing money with your partners sometimes tends to be even smoother than ever when you're using this app. You can track all of the shared and personal accounts, set your goals, stay on the same page without all of the stress. Instead of juggling through multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, and even plan long-term goals. Just keep that in mind, folks. Guess what? How do you go about doing such things? I'll tell you how. Because this is actually where you take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LockedOnNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your very first year. That's monarchmoney.com, MONARCH, money.com. Use the code. Don't forget that part. If you want to get half off your first year, that code, Locked On NBA.
Time to reveal where the game was won or lost. It's the turning point.
Yes, it is the turning point. You heard it right, folks. And, every single time that we look at having conversations about this game, and I'm always trying to keep that eye on what was some of the biggest determining factors, what were some of the key plays that took place that kind of stuck out to me like a sore thumb in terms of plays that made differences within the game, right? And so I think that it was very important for the Hawks to do something that could potentially put this game out of reach, because it is far too often that the Atlanta Hawks go up with a lead and then allow another team to go on runs and storm back. And that was part of my concern. Maybe not as much with the inactive players on tonight, but at the same time, I'm keeping it in the back of my mind because clearly this is something that I've seen before, right? So from that standpoint, I'm thinking like, what was the one that actually put the Charlotte Hornets away, right? So I'm looking at this and I'm thinking third quarter, and obviously the second quarter, I think, is where they just clearly ran away with this thing, because when I'm looking at the, quarter scoring, the third quarter isn't necessarily the one where they scored the most points. That would have been the second quarter with 38. But when I'm looking at the third quarter where they scored 36 points, what stuck out to me about that was the stretch with about 9 minutes remaining. The score is 79-63, and all of a sudden the Atlanta Hawks go on a 21-5 run, where I think you do have to really credit Zachary Reese-Shea and Dyson Daniels. Between both of those guys that hit multiple threes during that stretch, also hit about, 2 or 3 shots apiece from the field during that particular stretch as well, which I thought was very key, because it not only extended the lead, but in addition to that, it came with stops. This wasn't just about Hawks were hitting shots and then the opposite team just couldn't hit wide open shots. I think it was very telling that the Hawks actually stepped up their defense as well during that time. And of course, the mentality after this run was that was probably the most important, which is to not let the opposition come back and make a run to keep it close. But I think that before you even have that conversation, you have to separate yourself from the other team. And I think that's something that the Hawks did with Charlotte on tonight. So I think that there were also a few other plays within that stretch where Dominic Barlow played pretty well too, gave some contribution with some very simple shots. Here again, I will say this much: another game where it appeared that the Hawks really didn't have to work too hard to make their money on tonight, which I think is not only a good thing, but I don't feel like they, maybe take advantage is not the term, but I don't feel like that they allowed that to get the best of them, right? I don't feel like they feel like that's something that's just so easy that they'll be able to score on anyone, anytime, anywhere kind of thing. I don't think that that's something that they take for granted. I think they work very hard for those baskets, and that's something that they did during that stretch on tonight. And that's where I like to see them putting their foot on the gas and putting themselves in position to create some separation, then go off and give some other guys some critical playing time as well, so that they can get some shots up and get everybody included in the offense and so forth. So when you're looking at it, Zachary Reese-Shea on that 21-5 run, Zachary Reese-Shea and Dyson Daniels was certainly responsible for 2/3 of that scoring, 14 of those 21 points, which I think was obviously something that was very, very, very critical. I'll say this much too, and that is the fact that when I'm looking at this game, it's evident that the Atlanta Hawks need to impose their will in the front court. And maybe one of the more impressive things about them being able to do such things is the fact that they don't really have a ton of scoring in the front court for guys, that play in the 4 and the 5 position, with the exception of probably Oyeka Okongwu. We haven't seen Clint Capella as of late. So I think that while that hurts, you wonder how they're still able to score so many points in the paint. And this is where you got to give a little extra credit, because they don't have those bigs with that kind of talent, respectfully to guys like Barlow and a couple others. But you also don't have Clint Capella. You also don't have Larry Nance, who contributed early on with some of the success. But where they haven't really dwindled from is allowing teams to outscore them in the paint, as they also just really, maybe not necessarily dominated, but I think when you factor in that they're so limited in the front court, to see them out rebound Charlotte on tonight 46-39, and everybody knows that one particular area on the stat sheet that I am a stickler for, because I really do believe that it has that much difference in determining whether you do or don't lose a basketball game. Is not just within rebounding itself, but also within offensive rebounding as well. So when you're looking at that and you see that they not only out rebounded the Charlotte Hornets, but also on the offensive side, 11-10 by maybe edging them. In many cases, you start looking at that rebounding comparison or discrepancy comparison between one another, and whoever wins that, in addition to the offensive rebounding, is going to win that game in most cases, probably 6 or 7 times out of not. So that's something that the Atlanta Hawks was able to do. Also, from a steal standpoint, almost at double the amount of the steals. So again, you can see where I was talking about within that third quarter on that stretch where they really stepped up their defense. That is where you've seen those steals come into play, and they really hunker down a little bit and have more of that defensive anchor type of mentality, specifically on the perimeter, where I know a lot of teams that do tend to come back on the Hawks is because of the 3-point shooting and so forth. So it's good to see the Atlanta Hawks defending well as on the offensive side of the ball, going ahead and crashing to the glass as well. So I'm also looking at a particular player here who has gone down, and I don't know how long he's going to be out. That guy is Caris LeVert, and I've been saying it for I don't know how many weeks, probably instead of Muhammad Gay. As much as you guys know that I love Muhammad Gay, I'm not sure that he should be the guy that's in this starting lineup. I like him off the bench with the energy he brings and so forth. And this other guy I love bringing off the bench as well. But that guy is Caris LeVert. I think that he's a scoring machine. If you need that scoring off the bench, then obviously he's your guy. I've called him the replacement for DeAndre Hunter. I like him as a starter. I like him as a bench player. I like him as a contributor. I like him as a role player. I like him as a basketball player, right? But clearly we don't have him and don't know when he's coming back. So who's the next guy that you put into that spot to kind of replace that? And I think that for me, I think it's pretty clear that you bring along another one of the newbies. Whom else other than Terrence Mann, who's been playing much better recently, obviously. And I think that it's been clear that he's had to be the one to do such things. Similarly to where you were without Bogey at one point in time, just for example, and you really needed to use the combination of Garrison Matthews and Vit Krejci to be able to make up for some of what you weren't getting from Bogey, because he either A, wasn't shooting it fantastic, right, to what we're gotten accustomed to and used to, but even more so because we wasn't seeing him, come off the bench and get a whole lot of time, and was kind of wondering what was going on and so on and so forth. So I kind of make a similar comparison to that, where you needed somebody to step in and be more along the lines of like that plug and play type of player. And I think that that's what, Terrence Mann is. On tonight, looking at what Terrence Mann has been able to do and really helping out this bench, because we talk so much about the bench and we credit so much about the bench and their ability to be able to outscore opponents. I think they lead the NBA in terms of scoring coming off of the bench total its totality and so forth. But Terrence Mann on tonight, 12 points, 4 rebounds, only in 22 minutes, but shot 5 for 8 from the field, 2 for 3 from 3. So that's always a really good sign when you have someone who is like a Caris LeVert, who you anticipate coming off the bench and giving that high octane, high volume scoring, shooting, offensive firepower. And now he goes down as much as you rely on him. And now you got to look at somebody else. And I think now that guy is Terrence Mann. It's about time that we start having conversations about him kind of stepping up, right? Even though he just got there, and I overstand that in fact. But when you have situations like that, it's literally the next man up. And it's good that we've been able to see signs being taken from him in order to do such things. So definitely want to throw that out there. On the other side, we'll talk about our player of the game, in addition to what you will be talking about for the next few days until we start looking forward to the Golden State Warriors coming up on Saturday on the other side of this break. Well, it's that time again, and you know what I mean by that time again. It's basketball season that is heating up, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, of course, you know how this works. If you don't, I'm here to tell you. You pick you pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, right, for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. I said that correctly. I did not stutter. In fact, I did. So I'll say it again. With Prize Picks, you just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections. Try saying that 3 times fast, for a shot to win up to, I'll tell you what I didn't stutter on, 1,000 times your cash. It's easy to use, available in over 30 states, and lets you mix and match projections across different sports. So it doesn't have to necessarily just be the NBA. It can also be college basketball. It's March Madness. Everybody's going crazy, filling out brackets and so forth. Don't just let the brackets in your own personal office pool be the way that you make money. You can make money right here with Prize Picks as well, because with Prize Picks, they make it simple for you. You can set up your lineup in less than 60 seconds and stay engaged all game long. When you win, you don't have to sit there and wait on your money and texting somebody else and hitting up the bookie and trying to find out. He's trying to duck and dodge your calls, and now you're chasing down somebody for your money. That doesn't work here with Prize Picks. Your money hits your account in as little as 15 minutes. Absolutely, positively, no waiting around. How about this? Taco Tuesday deals. What's today? Taco Tuesday. That's right. Every Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25%, giving even more value to your lineup. So what do you need to do in order to take advantage of such things? I'll tell you right now. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly. 50 big ones after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the bracket breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
Last couple minutes that I have here with you guys, or that you have me here, before we start kind of turning things over to look forward to the Golden State Warriors. That's going to be on Saturday evening. You better believe I'm going to be all tapped in and dialed in for that one. I think that it is really important that not only that we start talking about which kind of rare form that we see the Atlanta Hawks in, and because of that, I think it's just equally important to let you know that that is the particular department in which I believe people will be talking about.
This is what you'll be talking about.
How about this, folks? Everybody's heard of 50, 40, 90, right? 50% from the field, 40% from three, 90% from the free throw line for individual players in most cases. Well, I don't know how long it's been. Would love to find out how long it's been. However, 50, 40, 80 was good enough for the Atlanta Hawks over the Charlotte Hornets here on tonight. 54% from the field, 49% from three, 80% from the free throw line. And I think probably the most important thing here is the fact that these are a few departments and compartments in which we have been talking about not only over the course of the last couple of days, not only over the course of the last few weeks, but now we're talking months. How about try for the beginning of the season, where it's been so difficult to kind of put together just one sometimes, like literally and barely even two in many cases. These three areas on the floor: the 3-point shooting, the turnovers, and the free throws. And everybody knows how Tanisha feels about the free throws. So I'm going to have to tap in with her on this tip about this game to make sure that she knows that we addressed the free throw shooting amongst all the rest of these things. Let's talk about what they did on tonight. Obviously, as stated before, from the 3-point line, where the Atlanta Hawks were able to knock down almost 50% of their threes. Hot shooting. Need them to do it against Golden State on Saturday, but hot shooting nonetheless against the Charlotte Hornets on Tuesday night. In addition to that, like we said, the free throw line, 80%. I'd love to be a little bit further north of 80%. Is it going to be 100? Not in many cases. We saw it not too long ago, but not in many cases. Is it going to be 90%? There's some instances where we see that, right? But there isn't much, right? We haven't. It's rare that you're going to see the 100% free throw shooting and 90% as a team free throw shooting. But if I can get you in the 80s somewhere, right? Minimum 80, like we saw here on tonight, that's what they were able to do. And that was something that was satisfying because, let's face it, they're free, right? That's something that you just have to do is knock down those free ones. That is the free space on the bingo card. That is the extra credit that you get on the test in grade school just for printing your name on the paper and spelling it correctly, right? At least you get some points. And I think you have to take advantage of that every chance you get, especially and primarily if you are the Atlanta Hawks. So it's good to see them do that on tonight. And then last but certainly not least, in the turnover department, could have been better, right? The bread and butter that we know from a points in the paint standpoint, where they were outscored 50-48 by 2. Sure, but I'll change that every day of the week if I can get this team to keep their turnovers at a bare minimum. 11 turnovers on tonight in comparison to Charlotte's 17. And that is probably the most important, combination of things as to why I believe that this Atlanta Hawks team was able to come away with a win on tonight and adding a number to the left side of the result column. Before we get up out of here, got to let you know who was the player of the game.
This is the Locked On Player of the Game.
Everybody's going to be so quick to go with Zachary Reese-Sachet. And again, I ran off to you some of his stats from earlier on tonight in the big time win, 134-102. But I'm going to go with Dyson Daniels. Right, in less minutes, 22 points, 7 rebounds, 7 assists, 10 for 12 from the field, just missing 2 shots and shot 50% from 3. I thought was outstanding. And the reason why I really wanted to highlight that more so than I did Zachary Reese-Sachet, because we all understand that he is the guy that has to step up and stand in the gap of one Jalen Johnson now, and be able to, I guess, just kind of rush him to kind of grow up, right, a little bit faster because of the circumstances without JJ. But I think in this situation where you have Dyson Daniels, who doesn't get nearly enough credit for what he brings you on the offensive end and just the total package, like I said, 3 rebounds and 3 assists away from a triple-double, I think is, it's especially considering the amount of minutes that he played, I think is fantastic. So I think, when we're looking at Dyson, we get so enamored and it's easy to fall in love with his ability to steal the basketball and the deflections, many of those that he has, and his ability to play defense on the ball, off the ball, and, just make it really difficult, altering shots, altering passes even, and so many different things that he does on the defensive end. He doesn't get nearly enough credit, and I think he really gets overlooked for his ability for what he does on the offensive end because of how superb he is on the defensive end. So appreciate everybody for chiming in with me, man, coming through, showing some love. How many hours are we looking at now before we start talking about the Golden State Warriors? Where are we at now? Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. What is that? 96-ish hours before we start talking about one of the hottest teams in the NBA. Stephen Curry, obviously, Draymond Green, Jimmy Butler. All of those guys have been known over the years for playing winning championships coming into State Farm Arena on Saturday evening. We'll be right here, nowhere else, to cap all of that action off than the official Atlanta Hawks postcast. Appreciate you guys for coming through and showing some love. Peace up. A-Town down. I see you then.